The galactic exploratory core vessel Valtherian drifted through the void, its silver hull reflecting the cold light of a dying star at the edge of an uncharted system. Captain Orlon Vec, a seasoned veteran of deep space reconnaissance, stood on the bridge with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the hollow display before him. The data streaming in from their long-range sensors made no sense. "Run another scan," he ordered. His navigation officer, a Luthari named Kesh, tapped hurriedly on the control panel. The bluish-green glow of his eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Confirmed, Captain. This is indeed a Class 15 Deathworld." His voice carried the weight of disbelief. "But we are detecting artificial structures, several hundred of them, and a distress beacon." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Class 15 was beyond extreme. Such planets were deemed uninhabitable by every sentient species in the galaxy. Even the most resilient civilizations rarely survived past a Class 10 world without extensive technological support. Class 15 worlds were legendary in their hostility, places where even the atmosphere conspired against life. Violent tectonic shifts, predatory megafauna, corrosive weather patterns. It was as if nature itself was a sentient force determined to eradicate any creature foolish enough to set foot on such ground. And yet, something had been built there, something intelligent. Captain Vec narrowed his eyes. "Who sent the distress signal?" Kesh hesitated. "The language. It's ancient human dialect. It matches records from Earth's lost deep space expeditions." Vec stiffened. Humans. That single word sent a ripple of unease through the crew. Though humanity was relatively new to the galactic stage, it had gained a reputation that made even the most advanced civilizations wary. The stories of their resilience, their adaptability, their sheer stubbornness had spread across the stars, turning them into a species that many approached with caution. They had endured disasters that would have wiped out other species, and they did so with an unsettling ease. If there were humans on this world, it meant one of their long-lost ships had crashed here. But how? And more importantly, how had anyone survived long enough to send a distress beacon? Vec turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Ashari. The feline-like Uvrati officer flicked her ears, a telltale sign of unease. "Prepare a landing team," Vec commanded. "We need to see this for ourselves." The Valtherian descended through the planet's turbulent atmosphere, shaking violently as windstorms battered its hull. The sky outside the viewing ports was a sickly green, streaked with flashes of crimson lightning. Below, an endless expanse of jagged terrain stretched out like the bones of some ancient, long-dead beast. The ground cracked and shifted under the force of unseen pressures, sending plumes of steam and toxic gas billowing into the sky. As they neared the coordinates of the distress signal, something impossible came into view. A settlement? Massive steel walls, reinforced with scavenged plating, formed a protective barrier against the hostile environment. Guard towers stood at each corner, their turrets sweeping methodically across the barren landscape. Smoke rose from chimneys, and beneath the fortified walls, clusters of buildings stood in defiance of the Deathworld's cruelty. More astonishingly, movement could be seen within, figures patrolling, working, living. Vec's grip tightened on the console before him. "How in the void?" Ashari's tail flicked in agitation. "That's not a ruin, Captain. That's an active colony." The Valtherians set down on a rocky plateau just outside the settlement's outer defenses. As the landing ramp extended, the oppressive heat of the world rushed inside, carrying the stench of burning minerals and something more primal, something that made even the hardened explorers uneasy. A small group emerged from the settlement, approaching the ship with measured caution. They were human, though not as Vec had expected. They did not stumble toward the landing site with desperation or fear. Their movements were deliberate, their posture steady. They wore armor crafted from scavenged metal and hides from creatures Vec could not identify. Their weapons, primitive yet deadly-looking, rested at their sides. and their eyes, sharp and unwavering, held no trace of weakness. The leader, a woman in her 50s with a scar running down her cheek, stopped a few paces away from Vec and his landing party. She looked at him, taking in his uniform, his ship, his crew. Then she smirked. "Took you long enough," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, as if she had expected them all along. There was no panic, no pleading, no desperation, only recognition. Beck took a step forward. "You sent the distress signal?" The woman chuckled, crossing her arms. "More like a beacon, to see if anyone out there still remembers us." She glanced back at her people before returning her gaze to him. "You're looking at the descendants of the Solace, crashed here 180 years ago. The galaxy probably thought we were dead." Vec's breath caught. The Solace had been a deep space exploration vessel that vanished nearly 2 centuries ago. Its disappearance had been one of Earth's greatest mysteries, and yet, "You survived," he murmured. The woman's smirk widened. "Survived?" she echoed. "No, Captain, we thrived." The words sent a chill through Vec's spine. This was no ordinary lost colony. This was something else, something unnatural. He looked past the woman to the settlement beyond. The walls were not just fortifications, they were trophies of conquest. Skulls of monstrous creatures adorned the gates, the symbols of a people who had faced the impossible and won. He had come expecting to find the desperate remnants of a doomed crew. Instead, he had found something terrifying. Humans had not just endured this world, they had conquered it. Beck followed the scarred woman through the settlement's gates, his boots crunching against the hardened dirt. The moment he stepped inside, he felt the weight of countless unseen eyes on him. Humans lined the pathways, standing near reinforced buildings and makeshift workshops, their expressions unreadable. Some carried weapons, blades fashioned from the bones of unknown creatures, rifles made from salvaged parts. Others worked with practiced efficiency, repairing structures, tending to cultivated patches of strange vegetation, or skinning carcasses of monstrous beasts unlike anything recorded in galactic database. The settlement was alive, not in the way a desperate colony clung to survival, but as a thriving, self-sufficient society. These people were not waiting for rescue. They had built something permanent. The woman walked with the confidence of someone who belonged here, never glancing back to see if Vec was keeping up. She led him through a narrow street between reinforced barracks and storage units, her pace steady. At a glance, the settlement might have seemed crude, but Vec noticed its deliberate design. Defensive structures were positioned at strategic angles, offering clear sightlines for counterattacks. Traps were concealed in the terrain, barely visible beneath layers of dust and debris. There was no wasted space. Every structure, every pathway, every reinforced barricade served a purpose. Beck spoke only when she finally stopped in front of a central building. Larger than the others, its metal walls adorned with the remnants of shattered hull plating. The faded insignia of the Solace remained, a scarred memory of the ship that had brought these humans to this world. She turned to face him, crossing her arms. "You have questions," she said. Beck exhaled, nodding. "You claim your ancestors have been here for nearly 2 centuries. By all known standards, that should have been impossible. This is a Class 15 Deathworld. No sentient species has ever survived prolonged exposure to such an environment," the woman chuckled. "And yet, here we are." She gestured toward the settlement. "Not just surviving, living." Beck studied her closely. Her skin was weathered, her muscles lean but strong. A warrior, honed by decades of hardship. "How?" he asked. She motioned for him to follow, stepping into the central building. Inside, the space was a command hub, lined with aged yet functional technology scavenged from the wreckage of the Solace. Screens flickered with real-time data, mapping the surrounding terrain, tracking atmospheric conditions, monitoring the movement of local wildlife. Humans worked at various stations, adjusting parameters and exchanging information in a manner that reminded Vec of a well-trained military unit. She led him toward a large map displayed on a central console. The holographic projection showed the expanse of the land surrounding the settlement. Mountain ranges, deep chasms, toxic wastelands, and areas marked with warning indicators. The first generation barely lasted a year, she said, tracing a finger along the map. Our ancestors weren't prepared for this place. The ship crashed during a routine exploratory mission. Engine failure, no way to send a distress call. Most of the crew died in the first few months. She zoomed in on a particular region of the map, a valley carved between towering cliffs. Then they discovered this place, the only area where the planet didn't immediately try to kill them. Fewer seismic tremors, less toxic air, fewer apex predators. They fortified the wreckage, turned it into a shelter, and started learning. Vec frowned. Learning? She smirked. How to fight. She tapped a section of the map marked with numerous red markers. The creatures here aren't just dangerous, they evolve. They adapt to whatever hunts them, so our ancestors had to evolve faster. Beck's gaze swept across the room, taking in the hardened faces of the humans around him. Warriors, strategists, survivalists. This was not the desperate, fractured remnant of a lost ship. This was a civilization forged in conflict. She continued, over the generations, we stopped fearing this world. We embraced it, studied it, turned its dangers into advantages. Those monsters out there, she gestured toward the massive skull mounted on the far wall. Now we hunt them, use their hides for armor, their venom for weapons, their blood for medicine. Vec felt a chill run through him. These humans had not merely survived, they had integrated themselves into the brutal ecosystem of this planet, becoming part of it in a way no species had ever done before. He turned back to her. And the distress beacon? Her expression darkened slightly. We wanted to know if the galaxy still remembered us, if humanity still existed out there, beyond this place. Vec studied her carefully. You want to leave? She laughed, short, almost bitter. Leave? She shook her head. Not all of us. Some might. But most of us? We don't belong out there anymore. The galaxy has rules, bureaucracy, empires waging wars over territory and resources. We became something different here. We are something different. Vec felt the weight of her words settle in his mind. This wasn't just a lost colony waiting for rescue. This was an independent force, a hardened warrior society that had no intention of reintegrating into human civilization as it once was. Before he could respond, an alarm blared through the room. The humans around him immediately sprang into action. Screens shifted, displaying data. A massive red marker pulsed on the map, moving toward the settlement. She turned toward the display, her jaw tightening. Damn it, she muttered. Vec glanced at the screen. What's happening? She grabbed a rifle from the rack near the entrance. A hunt, she said. Something big is coming. Without another word, she strode toward the exit, barking orders to her people. The room erupted into coordinated action. Vec followed, stepping back into the searing heat of the planet. The ground trembled beneath his feet. Something was approaching, and whatever it wasn't afraid of them. The alarm still echoed through the settlement as Vec stepped outside, the oppressive heat of the planet pressing down on him like a living force. The ground beneath his boots trembled, sending tiny vibrations up his legs. The air smelled of scorched minerals and something deeper, something primal. He had seen battlefields on dozens of worlds, had faced dangers he once believed unmatched, but the tension in the faces of the humans around him sent a clear message. This was no ordinary threat. The woman strode ahead of him, rifle in hand, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon beyond the settlement's walls. She moved with the confidence of someone who had faced death 1,000 times and had grown indifferent to its presence. Her people moved in perfect unison, spreading out to their designated positions without hesitation. Status? She called out. One of the sentries high on the wall shouted back, his voice firm despite the clear urgency. Visual confirmed. It's a Titan-class predator, coming in from the East Ridge. Size estimate 20 meters, maybe more. A ripple of tension spread through the gathered humans. Even the seasoned warriors among them tightened their grips on their weapons. Vec turned his gaze toward the ridge, where dust swirled in the air, obscuring whatever massive creature was making its approach. His mind struggled to process the implications. 20 meters? That was the size of a heavy assault transport, a walking fortress of flesh and muscle. The woman exhaled sharply and turned to her people. All right, you know the drill. Fire teams 1 and 2 take the perimeter. Keep it distracted. Harpoon squads aim for the joints. We bring it down before it reaches the walls. She turned her gaze to Vec, her smirk returning. You wanted to see how we survived? Pay attention. Vec had no intention of standing idly by. He reached for his sidearm, but the woman let out a dry chuckle. That toy won't even scratch its hide, she said. Stay close if you don't want to get trampled. A deep, rumbling growl rolled across the valley like distant thunder. Vec felt it in his bones. The dust cloud shifted, revealing a massive silhouette moving with deliberate power. When the beast finally emerged into view, even Vec's hardened military instincts faltered for a moment. It was monstrous. Thick, scaled hide gleamed in the harsh sunlight, each plate of armor-like skin overlapping in jagged ridges. Muscles coiled beneath its massive frame, every movement a testament to its raw power. Its elongated head bore a row of serrated fangs, each the size of a human's arm. Multiple sets of reptilian eyes glowed with an unsettling intelligence, locking on to the settlement as if recognizing it as a challenge. A deep guttural snarl rattled the air as the beast lowered its body, preparing to charge. The woman didn't hesitate. Now, the first volley struck like a lightning storm. Fire teams unleashed a coordinated barrage of high-velocity rounds, their weapons modified with armor-piercing tips scavenged from the wreckage of the Solace. The rounds hammered into the Titan's thick hide, sending flashes of bioluminescent blood spraying across the cracked earth. The creature roared in pain, but it did not slow. Vec watched as harpoon squads took position, launching massive spear-like projectiles tethered by reinforced cables. The first harpoon embedded itself in the beast's left forelimb. The second found its mark near the base of its thick neck. The creature recoiled, its movements momentarily hindered. The woman grinned. Good. Now bring it down. The harpoon squads heaved, the cables groaning under the force of the Titan's resistance. The beast fought back, muscles straining against the hold, claws tearing deep gouges into the rocky terrain as it resisted. Vec had seen military mechs struggle to withstand less force than what this creature was exerting. Then, something shifted. The Titan twisted, yanking its harpooned limb with unnatural strength. The recoil sent one of the human warriors flying through the air, his body slamming into a barricade with a sickening crunch. Another harpoon snapped free, the metal tether whipping violently, narrowly missing one of the fire teams. The beast bellowed, shaking the ground with its fury. Adjust the angle, keep the tension steady, the woman barked. She turned to one of the teams on the wall. Hit its eye cluster, blind it. A sniper positioned on the highest point of the settlement lined up his shot. The moment his rifle fired, the Titan recoiled, its roar turning into an enraged shriek as one of its secondary eyes burst into a spray of dark ichor. It thrashed violently, but the harpoon teams had reinforced their grip, keeping it locked in place. Vec could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Every movement from the humans was precise, every order followed without hesitation. There was no fear, only focus. This was not desperation. This was a well-practiced, coordinated assault. Then the woman moved. She sprinted forward, weaving through the battlefield with terrifying speed. As the Titan swung its massive limb in an attempt to break free, she leapt onto the closest harpoon line, using it as a foothold to propel herself higher. In one fluid motion, she scaled the side of the beast's thick neck, her blade drawn. The Titan realized too late. With a swift, calculated strike, she drove her blade between the armored plates just below the creature's skull. The weapon sank deep, piercing the vulnerable tissue beneath. The beast's roar cut short, replaced by a choking, guttural rasp. For a moment, Silence fell over the battlefield. Then, with a final shudder, the Titan collapsed. The ground shook as its massive form hit the earth, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. The settlement stood still, the warriors catching their breath. The woman pulled her blade free, sliding down the corpse of the fallen beast with practiced ease. By the time her boots hit the ground, she was already barking orders. "Get the harvest teams out here. We're using every part of this thing." Vec exhaled, his heart still pounding. He had fought alongside some of the most advanced militaries in the galaxy, but he had never seen anything like this. The woman turned to him, wiping the dark blood from her blade. "Now do you understand, Captain?" Vec nodded slowly. "You're not just survivors," she smirked. "No, we're hunters." The air still smelled of blood and scorched earth as Vec followed the woman through the aftermath of the battle. The Titan's massive corpse loomed over the settlement, its bioluminescent veins still flickering faintly in death. Human warriors moved with swift efficiency, harvesting the creature's hide, extracting its venom, and salvaging anything useful from its carcass. Every part of the beast would serve a purpose: armor, weapons, medicine, even fuel. Nothing would go to waste. The woman strode ahead, her movements unhurried but purposeful. She had fought, commanded, and killed without hesitation, and yet she showed no signs of exhaustion. Vec had seen hardened soldiers break after lesser battles, but she acted as if this was nothing more than routine. He had begun to understand. This was not just a way of life for these humans. It was the only way they knew. She led him toward a structure built into the remains of the Solace, a reinforced command center where the highest-ranking members of the settlement gathered. The metal walls bore deep scars, remnants of past battles, yet the structure remained firm. A set of heavy doors slid open as they approached, revealing a dimly lit war room lined with holographic displays. Several humans were already inside, awaiting her arrival. Beck took in the sight of the gathered warriors. Each one bore the hardened expression of someone who had spent their entire life fighting. Scars crisscrossed their exposed skin. Their armor was well worn but meticulously maintained, and their eyes held a sharpness that spoke of unwavering discipline. These were not simple survivors. They were leaders, strategists, commanders of a civilization forged in the crucible of this world. The woman took her place at the head of the table, arms crossed as she addressed the group. "The Titan is down. No major losses on our end, but the eastern perimeter took some damage. Reinforce it before nightfall." A man standing to her left nodded. His presence commanded respect, his graying hair and sharp features marking him as one of the elders of the settlement. "Understood. I'll have the engineers prioritize the repairs." His voice was calm, controlled. Another warrior, younger but no less formidable, leaned forward. "That was the third Titan class in 2 months," he said. "They're getting bolder, stronger." The woman's expression darkened slightly. "I know." Her gaze shifted to Vec. "And now, we have something else to consider." Vec met her eyes. He had spent his life negotiating with warlords, politicians, and admirals, but this was different. There was no pretense here, no need for diplomacy. These people did not play games. "You sent the distress beacon," he said, his tone even. "You wanted to see if the galaxy still remembered you. Now that I'm here, what do you intend to do?" The room fell silent. The humans exchanged glances, but no one spoke. It was not hesitation, it was calculation. Finally, the woman exhaled. "That depends," she said. "You've seen what we are, what we've become. Do you think the galaxy is ready for us?" Vec considered his words carefully. The truth was, he wasn't sure. These humans had adapted to conditions no other species could endure. They had turned a Deathworld into their home, had mastered its dangers, and had become something far beyond what the rest of humanity had ever intended. "If you return," he said, "you won't be seen as heroes. The galaxy has changed. Empires rise and fall. The bureaucrats on Earth won't know what to do with you." The older man chuckled. "That's assuming we care what they think." The younger warrior frowned. We can't ignore the risks. If word gets out about what we've built here, someone will come looking, not to rescue us, but to control us." The woman nodded. "That's what I'm concerned about." She turned back to Vec. "You came here as an explorer, but your people, your government, they won't see it that way. If you report what you've found, what do you think happens next?" Vec clenched his jaw. He knew the answer. Earth's leaders would see these humans as an anomaly, something to be studied, controlled, perhaps even feared. The Galactic Union would debate their existence, sending diplomats with empty promises, while secretly preparing contingencies in case these humans were deemed a threat. And if one of the more aggressive factions in the galaxy caught wind of them, there would be war. "I can keep your existence a secret," he said carefully, "for a time. But eventually someone else will come. Another ship, another crew, and they might not be as understanding." The woman leaned back, considering his words. "Then we have a choice to make," she said. "Stay hidden or take the first step before the galaxy makes the decision for us." The older man exhaled. "We've been waiting for this moment for generations," he said. "But if we do this, we do it on our terms. No diplomats, no bureaucrats. We show them what we are before they try to define it for us." The younger warrior crossed his arms. "And if they don't accept us?" The woman's smirk returned. "Then we remind them why humans were never meant to be underestimated." The room fell silent once more. Every person in the room understood the stakes. Vec finally spoke. "If you go down this path, there's no turning back. The moment you reveal yourselves, the galaxy will react, some with curiosity, some with fear, and some with hostility." The woman's gaze never wavered. "We've faced worse." Vec exhaled. He had known from the moment he stepped into this settlement that these people were not ordinary. They were not lost. They were not waiting to be saved. They were ready. He glanced at the map displayed on the central table, his mind already working through the possible outcomes. There was no stopping this. The only question was how it would unfold. Finally, he nodded. "Then let's make sure the galaxy hears your story the right way." The woman's smirk widened. "Now you're starting to understand." Vec stood at the edge of the command center's balcony, overlooking the settlement as the last rays of sunlight cast long shadows across the hardened earth. The Titan's carcass had been nearly stripped, its valuable remains sorted and stored with meticulous efficiency. The humans moved with a quiet determination, their routines ingrained into their very existence. There was no celebration, no triumph. They had won another battle, but it had only been another day in their endless war for survival. The woman approached, her gaze following his as she leaned against the reinforced railing. "You've been quiet," she said. Vivek exhaled slowly, still trying to process everything. She smirked. "Not used to seeing humans like this, are you?" He shook his head. "No. The galaxy sees humans as unpredictable, stubborn, resourceful, but nothing like this. You've taken survival to an entirely different level. You're not just adapting to this planet, you're becoming part of it." She glanced down at the settlement, her expression unreadable. "That's the only way to live here. Either you become stronger than the world around you, or you die." Vec studied her face, searching for any sign of uncertainty. He found none. These people had made their choice long ago. They had accepted what they had become. The real question was whether the galaxy could accept them in return. The older man from the war room stepped onto the balcony, his posture rigid, his eyes sharp. "It's time," he said. "If we're going to do this, we need to move before someone else finds us first." The woman turned to Vec. "Your ship, can it send a message that won't be intercepted?" He hesitated. "Depends on the message, and who you want to receive it." She crossed her arms. "Earth, the Galactic Union, anyone who thinks they still have a say in what happens to us." Vec sighed. "If you send that message, there's no undoing it. The moment the rest of humanity learns about you, the entire political structure of the galaxy will shift. Some will want to bring you back under control. Others will see you as a threat. And there will be those who see you as an opportunity. The older man scoffed. Let them come. We've spent generations fighting this planet. The galaxy will be easy by comparison. The woman smirked but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the darkening horizon. We're not asking for permission. We're not asking to be accepted. We just want them to know we're here, that we endured. Vec clenched his jaw. And if Earth decides to classify you as a rogue colony? If the Union declares you a potential threat? The woman finally looked at him, her expression unshaken. Then we prove 'em right. Silence stretched between them. The weight of the moment settled like an immovable force. Vec had spent his life adhering to the rules of interstellar politics, but standing here, he realized those rules did not apply to these people. They had forged their own existence, separate from the fragile alliances and endless bureaucracy of the Galactic Union, and yet despite everything, they still wanted to be known. Vec exhaled. I'll send the message. The woman nodded. Good, then let's make history. 2 weeks later, the Valtherian had long since departed, but the settlement remained unchanged. The people continued their routines, training, fortifying, preparing. The message had been sent, and now all that remained was to wait. The first ship arrived on the 15th day, a small diplomatic vessel, sleek and unarmed, its markings identifying it as an official envoy of the Galactic Union. It landed cautiously, its crew hesitant as they stepped onto the hostile world. The woman met them at the gates, flanked by her people. She saw the uncertainty in the diplomats' faces, the way their eyes darted between the battle-scarred humans and the towering remains of the Titan still resting in the distance. They were afraid. The lead diplomat cleared his throat. We received your message. The Galactic Union wishes to understand your situation before making any official decisions. She smirked. Take all the time you need. She gestured behind her where the settlement stood tall, where warriors trained in the open, where weapons were sharpened and battle strategies were refined. Just understand this, she continued. We're not asking for recognition. We're not asking for protection. We're not asking for anything. She stepped forward, her voice unwavering. We're just letting you know that we exist, and that we're not going anywhere. The diplomat swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. Understood, and with that, history changed. The lost colony was lost no more. The galaxy now knew the truth. Humanity had not just survived the impossible, it had conquered it.